The Process, a podcast about creativity and experimental music. In the world of experimental music, outcomes and accolades for creators can be uncertain and at times seem far and few between. Therefore, creators and practitioners of experimental music must embrace the one thing they will always have complete control over: the process. This podcast aims to understand this creative process by listening to new works and discussing them with their creators. Each episode focuses on one creator and their music. Understanding how and why they create can inform aspiring creatives and help audiences better understand and navigate experimental music. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and I'll be your host as we explore the world of experimental music, creativity, and the human need to find purpose in their world and lives. This is The Process. Stefanie Lubkowski's initial compositional efforts involved developing unusual timbres on her mother's Wurlitzer organ and experimenting with sound collages in her high school electronic music studio. These early explorations nurtured Stefanie's interest in creating sound worlds guided by harmony and punctuated by melody. Her main sources of inspiration are literature and the natural world. She went on to study music and technology and guitar performance at Connecticut College in New London, Connecticut, and received her master's in composition from the New England Conservatory. Stefanie has written for orchestra, voice, various chamber ensembles, and electronic media. She has been commissioned by New Gallery Concert Series, the Fourth Wall Ensemble, Transient Canvas, Charles River Wind Ensemble, Naked Eye Ensemble, Departure Duo, marimbist Matt Chirac, and soprano Elizabeth Holliday Kwan. Stefanie received her doctorate in composition from Boston University. Stefanie is the recipient of a Massachusetts Cultural Council Music Composition Finalist Grant for 2015. She currently serves as Development and Publications Manager at the Boston Modern Orchestra Project and teaches composition and theory at Concord Academy. On today's episode, we listen to Right Now in a Second, performed and commissioned by Transient Canvas.
A lot of time I'll start with a sound in mind, like I have a sound, not necessarily a specific timbre, but maybe the way the pieces I want it to sound in total, or an idea of how the sound is, what the trajectory of the piece is going to be. Sometimes I'll start with an idea of relationships, pitch relationships, rhythm relationships, timbre relationships, instrumental relationships that I want to explore in the piece and how I want those to evolve over the course of the piece. Sometimes it just comes from listening to the players and what I know they can do and what I think is interesting in what I've heard them do and what I want to explore. But it all kind of starts with some sort of impression of what I want to do.
Where do you normally get these ideas or these concepts of what about this relationship? Where do those normally come from? Are you like watching a movie? Are you in rehearsal?
I've realized over the course of the pandemic, actually, because I've been starved for these experiences, is that a lot of it comes from listening to other music or listening to people play.
Yeah.
And also being out in the world and listening to things, the way the train sounds as it comes out of a tunnel, or the way a conversation sounds if you overhear it from a distance, wind in trees, things like that. And because I'm just not out and about that much,
right.
I'm really missing that. But just the sounds around me or my experiences of other music.
Okay, so let's say we're in pandemic times here. So like you said, you hear the wind blowing through the trees. This inspires you in some way. This makes you think about a possible musical relationship that you could write about. What do you do next? Where do you go? Do you go to pencil and paper? What's your next step in the process?
If it's a very natural sound, like something out in the world that is produced regularly, I might actually go and record it.
Yeah.
I take it home and sort of analyze the recording, a spectral analysis or whatever, just to get an idea of what's in there. I don't have perfect pitch, so it's not like I can listen to, the sound of a buzz or something and say like, aha, that's a G.
Or like a train and be like, oh, it's a, it's a C major chord or something. Yeah.
I can't do that just on the fly. No. So I might take it and analyze it. And then I might, with pencil and paper, and like, I don't really compose at an instrument, but I might use a keyboard or something to just like try out some sounds and think about what that would be like. I wrote a piece based on the sound of cicadas because I really love the sound of cicadas. Yeah. And I took a recording, not one I made actually, because it's very hard to make a good recording of cicadas.
Are these the 7-year cicadas, or are these the everyday? The garden variety.
No, they're the so I determined which cicadas were prevalent in the area I grew up, and it turns out it's the dog day lyra cicada, I think is
dog day lyra cicada. Okay,
something like that. Yeah. And then I found a recording online, and I used that recording and I analyzed it and to determine because what really interested me about the sound was the pitch shift.
Sure.
The way that it changes pitch. So I analyzed that to see exactly how much it changed. And then I picked some pitches and went for it.
I did an outside orchestra recording concert series in my youth. And as the orchestra would get louder, the cicadas would get louder to compete with the orchestra. So, you said with cicadas, you're analyzing the pitches, right? Or you're saying the change in pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happens is that I don't think about the sound that's inspiring me as a whole. I think about what is it about this sound that is most interesting to me, and then I figure out how that works. And that can be instrumental sounds too. I think in right now in a second, I was really interested in like the softer side of the marimba with sort of soft mallets and very soft attacks, and the way that the clarinet can have a very subtle attack and release, the way that those things interacted. So we're hearing Transient Canvas, which is Amy Advocate on bass clarinet and Matt Sharrock on marimba. And there's also a snare drum in there. Not usually part of the ensemble, but I asked.
Yeah. And why were you interested in snare? Because they often play together, but I've heard they sometimes have rules about not including extra percussion or
right. Yeah. They usually don't, but I had a very strong idea and I talked to Matt about it and he agreed. Because this piece is really about small sounds and very intimate, soft sounds and the way they can evolve, and also the way that they can put other kinds of sounds into relief, the contrast between different sounds. I really wanted to get those kind of subtle white noise, breathy sounds. And one of my favorite ways to get that is brushes or rubbing a snare drum.
On the snare, yeah.
You can't really get an equivalent sound on the marimba. So I really wanted to use that. And so we just decided to include it in the piece.
Yeah, because that sort of corresponds to what's happening in the clarinet with the sort of breathing through the instrument. And what was the overarching theme of this piece? It's kind of implicit in the name, and I feel like it's one of those pieces where it's like it's named what it's named because it does what it says it's going to do. But for you, you talked about relationships, right? So what was the maybe relationship that inspired this?
Initially, the inspiration comes from I was listening to a lot of relaxation and ASMR videos on YouTube because I suffer from insomnia occasionally, and those actually really help.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was really fascinated with the variation of these small sounds that I think we think of as almost incidental.
Right.
They're not the intentional sound.
Yep.
Often,
or they're necessary to produce the pitch we want. We have to have a breath, we have to,
right. Or even on the videos, like the sound of someone smoothing fabric. Like that's not something that's incidental to an activity. That usually isn't the activity itself.
Right.
And how these small accidental sounds can have a kind of a big effect. They were certainly really making a big impression on me in that it was helping me to relax and sleep.
Right.
And I thought about equivalent sounds on other instruments. And again, one of my favorites is the way that the clarinet sound can start from and end with a breathy sound.
Yeah.
And the way that is kind of an incidental sound in the clarinet, or traditionally has been not the point, not the main sound, but something that happens around the main sound. And then the equivalent in marimba and percussion. And I thought about how those sounds from those instruments could interact.
The piece at the very beginning, it feels very pointillistic to me, and as the piece progresses, I noticed there's then this relationship between these sort of more pointillistic and sort of temporary sounds and sort of longer, more overlapping sounds.
I wanted to start out concentrating on each moment, concentrating on the sound in the moment, and really having the listener kind of bathe in that sound. It's not really about where you're going, it's about where you are, right now.
Right.
And really experience that sound, like give the listener time to experience each sound. But then also I wanted to grow and develop those sounds.
Right.
And yes, in the beginning, it's very pointillistic. I didn't want to create a sense of melody or a really strong linear sense, but just a sort of a moment by moment, listen to this sound in this moment, and then having those grow.
And silence, right? So the silence was a way to just put, here's a sound, silence, so it can kind of sit
Yeah.
in that space.
Yeah, I put a lot of space in between, what we would think of as events, so that, there's a sense of like just this right here, right now.
One thing that I observed as the first section and sort of the first half proceeds, those pointillistic things become more active. The parts almost seem more frenetic.
The second half of the piece, where it's very frenetic and definitely loud,
Yeah.
I thought of it in terms of building up these small sounds into kind of this unexpected contrast. I also was really thinking about and interested in like how we experience things, whether it's temperature or sounds or sights, in relationship to each other. A metaphor I used with my students once was, you can't appreciate how warm the room you're sitting in is unless you go outside on that 2-degree day.
Right.
And then you come back in and you think, wow, it really is like nice and toasty in here.
Yeah. Or it's too hot in here. I'll have that a lot of times, like, oh, it's too warm in here now. Yeah.
Right. But you really you can really feel the temperature or whatever it is you're experiencing, almost like only in reference to its opposite.
Right. And then it quickly dissipates.
Yeah. The sort of loud, exciting part quickly dissipates in that piece. I was also really interested in the drama of the absence of sound. This loud section to culminate in some big burst, but it doesn't. I wanted to try creating drama by dropping out. Right. Dropping the sound out rather than like having it build up to an expected.
Right. We could have had like a real formal melody or a real formal, like something really big, like a Schwantner moment. I was talking with another composer about the Mountains Rising Nowhere Schwantner moment, and like not doing that and like staying away from that. In a way, the big moment was non-climax.
Yeah, I got that actually from, it's Schnittke's Second String Quartet. I think the second movement. There's an enormous amount of activity, and then there's a measure of, maybe it's 2 measures. It's at least a measure of silence. Yeah. And when I listen to that piece, I think I at no other point am I as like on edge, just waiting for what's going to happen next as that measure of silence. Right. And I was thinking I was very much thinking about that. Like, it's almost like an inverse climax.
And it's more exciting than sometimes what will actually happen.
Right. Or it's like in a horror movie when the monster or the ghost seems so like horrible and frightening. And then you see it and you're like, oh.
Oh, you're like, that's really bad CGI. That's
or wow, that paper mache didn't age well. Right. But sometimes it's the horror movies where you never really see it.
Absolutely.
You never really see the whole monster that are the scariest.
Right.
And I was thinking about those kind of ideas, how absence, how taking something away can be more exciting than building it up sometimes. what is a creative domain? And I thought about it from some different angles. I mean, the one thing I do want to say is that for me, I don't see my creative domain as a fixed thing. I see it as maybe encompassing all of my interests and all of the things that go into the pieces I create and where I get my inspiration and all of those things. But I also see it as something that shifts and changes and grows over time. Yeah. I never really liked the idea of having kind of a static, like, this is the thing that I do as a composer. Yeah. I mean, these are the things I do now, but I can't say that, I can or want to, or even should be doing those things the same things 10 years from now. My interests are wide, and I like making a wide range of music. I like listening to a wide range of music. So, and lately, I've gotten back into making, non-classical music, like punk, rock, and metal, and even like getting into working on some ambient electronica type stuff. Yeah. So I guess, I would say the creative domain is like all of the things I'm interested in, all of the things that go into a piece, and all of the things that come out of those interests. But it's this amorphous, shifting thing.
So related to that, I think when I think about, defining your creative domain, what about composers or music creators or people that write music that identify as a band? I'm a band composer, or I'm an electroacoustic composer. How do you feel about people who sort of do plant their flag in a certain style or approach?
I don't. Yeah,
no, I don't feel anything.
I don't have, I don't look down on them or have sort of pejorative feelings. I think that, we all have kind of what our interests are, what we find stimulating to do, and also maybe what works for us. Yeah. As a composer, like, I've never really tried to break into like orchestral composing, because that's just not something that's going to work for me right now. And I am very satisfied writing, more chamber works right now. Yeah. And if a person discovers that like writing band pieces really, really works for them and, helps them carve out a career, like, great,
Yeah.
I guess I'm just not a person who wants to write a manifesto or plant a flag or any of that, but I know it works for people, and that's great.
Well, Stefanie, this has been fantastic. It's been great hearing about you and your music and your process. Before I let you go, is there a place that people can go to find out more about you and your music?
I have a website, StefanieLubkowski.com. My first name is spelled with an F. But yeah, most of my website has sounds and links to SoundCloud and all of that.
And even some of the performances, I think I think there's a performance of Right Now in a Second on there as well.
Yep. There's a video of a performance that happened in Boston maybe 2 years ago.
Thanks to Stefanie for sharing her time and music with us. If you enjoyed this episode, check out other episodes in the series, and as always, like, subscribe, and leave a comment on your preferred podcasting app. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and this has been The Process.